ये और कॉल्स बीच में आ रहे हैं, क्या करें?
Sorry?
No, someone was calling me, so I was putting them on.
Okay.
Silent पे.
गुलाम साहब आप स्टार्ट कर दीजिए प्लीज.
Okay.
This session is live on the Facebook.
Okay. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to IoBM webinar on a very important topic, China-India military standoff and security implications for Pakistan. Today on this webinar, we have three distinguished panelists with voluminous professional credentials, which I may not be able to cover during their introduction. However, I'll take this privilege of introducing them in the alphabetical order. Ambassador Hussain Haroon Sahab, welcome. He is a distinguished public figure who served as a Minister of National Security, in addition to heading Pakistan's permanent mission to the United Nations in New York. He has a very keen eye on international relations. Then we have Ambassador Najamudin Sheikh, who is a distinguished diplomat who served as the Secretary for Foreign Affairs, Pakistan Ambassador to USA and Iran. He also served as a special envoy of the President on ASEAN, Japan, Central Asia. He was also associated with IoBM as a Chancellor. And of course, we have Ambassador Shahid Amin with a very distinguished career in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He's been ambassador for 18 long years in USSR, France, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, and additional foreign secretary. Myself, I am Ghulam Rasool Baluch. I was ambassador in Vietnam, and I've served in several capitals of the world, including New York. And I was also the Prime Minister's secretary and served with the 4 prime ministers. Before I hand over the floor to the distinguished panelists and we learn from them, let me just make some introductory remarks on today's topic. Ladies and gentlemen, the world history is at the inflection point. After 400 years of Western domination, a new Asian era seems to be heralding, with China as a dominant power. According to the majority of experts of the international affairs, the USA, the present superpower, and the next rising power, China, seem to be caught in what the Harvard professor Graham Allison calls the Thucydides trap, whether they can defy the trap and the world would witness a peaceful transition to a new multipolar world order, or they will go to war and let the destiny decide the winners and the losers. The omens are not very, very reassuring. Even in our own neighborhood, we see a conflict brewing between India and China, and that is what brings us to our today's topic for the discussion. However, we will be learning from our distinguished panelists what are the implications for Pakistan, what are the implications for the world with regard to Pakistan. I would invite the distinguished guests, if they want to make some kind of a statement on this overall situation with regard to the emerging multipolar world order, where China has a dominant role, and then we go on to specific questions on the conflict. If any of the panelists, or may I follow the alphabetical order and request Ambassador Hussain Haroon to make his statement, followed by Najamudin Sheikh Saab, followed by then Mr. Shahid Amin. So over to you, Hussain Haroon Saab.
Thank you. My salams to my fellow panelists. Yes, you're absolutely right. The world is at a very, very important crossroads of history. As you have rightly said, the West, after many hundred years of absolute dominance, two world wars, and so many minor wars. I think today Asia has its chance. Well, the West, led by the United States, will not cede territory. They have a necklace around their bodies, which constitutes Japan, India, and the Arab powers, three very important opposing powers to China in Asia. So they should have had China covered. I don't think they have. I think the game has opened. I think other countries are slowly, like Iran, Pakistan, perhaps to a lesser extent, Bangladesh, and other countries are slowly taking the road towards China, not because of China is really a rising power, but also because China is an obliging power. So let's see how this works out. This is just an opening statement to suggest that things have changed. It's no longer a unipolar world.
Thank you, sir. May I request Mr. Najamudin Sheikh to kindly favor us with his remarks and an understanding of the new emerging contours of a new world order.
Well, thank you very much. May I, like my senior colleague Hussain Haroon Saab, welcome my fellow participants and, of course, our moderator. Let me say that I really want to dwell on what an Asian century means and how the Chinese interpret this Asian century to be. You had a standoff between China and India for some time now. Let us say in the frozen wastes at the lake and at Galwan. But the trade figures suggest that total trade between India and China was $43 billion up to July. And in that, 30 billion was the export from China and 11 billion was the export from India. India had aimed for an economy to be of 5 trillion. At the moment, it is at 3 trillion, and I think that the recent economic downturn probably means that even this figure will be difficult to maintain, given the onslaught of COVID and its impact on India. What I'm trying to suggest is that, of course, today India has banned 59 apps that come from China, and yet Huawei's sales are now the highest in the world. They are followed by Apple, but after that, again, it is Oppo, Xiaomi, all brands that emanate from India, from China, and which have a great part of the market in India. Now, how much India is going to be able to do in terms of banning these, and particularly TikTok, is something that lies in the future, because India has also to visualize what damage such banning will do to India's own economy. So I think right now, I also see that Mr. Jaishankar wants to talk about the fact that India wants to put its relations with China on an even plane. He talks about both China and India talk about the fact that we have mechanisms and we are utilizing those mechanisms in order to resolve our problems without necessarily requiring any external interference. Mr. Jaishankar, I think, is particularly keen on this, and yet he is a minister in the cabinet of Prime Minister Modi. And Modi, I think, is very much intent on utilizing this as an opportunity to further cement the relations with the United States. How far this will go is an open question, because India has a lot of complaints vis-a-vis the United States, including the exclusion of H-1B visas, which have been the principal tool for India to retain its particular position in the United States. It is also looks like they are going to be putting limits on the number of Indian students who can be there, along with limits on the number of Chinese students who are going to be there. So there are, and of course, India has been insistent on the fact that it should be given preferential tariffs. It's a developing country, and that is a question on which I think President Trump has been adamant. What changes will come when the election perhaps brings President Biden to power is another matter, but that will be reflected both in the relationship between the United States and China, and the relationship between India and the United States. But at the moment, what we have to calculate is that Prime Minister Modi is intent on trying to strengthen this relationship, notwithstanding the many obstacles that stand in the way. So let me stop here, and we hear our colleague Ambassador Shahid Amin.
Thank you, sir, Mr. Najamudin Sheikh. May I request Mr. Shahid Amin, Ambassador Sahab, please favor us with your insight on the new emerging world order, if you will.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, everybody. Well, so far as your question is concerned, I think there is no doubt that the world is undergoing a profound change, and China is fast emerging as the next superpower. And we need to understand, at least so far as I am concerned, we need to understand what exactly China is trying to do. It is essentially concentrating on its economic performance, but also raising its military profile. But it is also, at the same time, it is determined not to have any wars and military clashes. So therefore, it follows that even with India, despite what has happened in the last few weeks, there is going to be no war, there is going to be no major conflagration, and neither with the United States, because this does not suit the Chinese scheme of things. They believe that over a period of time, the superpower status is coming to them, and they do not want to create any hurdles on the way which will sidetrack them or in a way obstruct their march forward. Now, I would like to make basically comments on the two issues which are in our subject today. One is this standoff between China and India and Ladakh, and the second is the security implications for Pakistan. My conclusion from the military clashes in Ladakh is it has been a major military setback for India, and India has apparently no ability or intention to take back the lost territory. It has, in other words, acquiesced in the loss of territory. Now, what I'm saying is not necessarily a kind of a partisan view. This is borne out by any number of statements or comments made by leading Indian experts. And I'll just quote a few. Former Foreign Secretary Nirupama Rao has concluded, after whatever happened in Ladakh, government has taken a realistic view of constraints emanating from the asymmetry of power with China. A polite way of saying India has bowed to the new reality at the LAC because China is stronger. In other words, she clearly says that whatever has happened is a military setback for India, but it is in no position to reverse it, and it has gone along with whatever has happened. In fact, in specific terms, India has lost territory, which some experts say is about 40 square kilometers in Ladakh. In the past, they had been patrolling up to finger 8. Now they are only coming up to finger 4. This suggests, but what does this suggest? This suggests that China has been constantly pushing back India. If you look back for the last many years, it has been constantly pushing back India, maybe in small chunks, not in a big area. But the latest clashes in Ladakh are significant. They are the most serious since 1967 in terms of casualties and so forth. Now, what are the security implications for Pakistan? The first question is, why has China adopted a more aggressive stance towards India, as shown by the events in Ladakh? I think there are 2 points which are relevant for our security. One is, China has given a kind of a proof to India that it is militarily stronger. It has been a major rebuff to India, and India more or less has acquiesced. So that point has been scored. The second point is that China is sending a warning to India that it should not do anything which will disrupt the Cpec route in northern part of Pakistan. India lately has been making threatening statements about Azad Kashmir, Gilgit-Baltistan, and so forth. And China, by this military action in Ladakh, has sent a message. Why? If for the sake of a few barren meters of land, China can take such a military initiative in Ladakh, how much more serious it will be when it comes to a threat coming to the Cpec route, which is far more strategic for China. So in that point of view, I think the Chinese action has strengthened Pakistan's security. Our security has received a boost because of the Chinese action in Ladakh. At the same time, we should not be negligent of possibilities of India's mischief. It may think of Pakistan as a softer target. There could be some adventure against Pakistan, and that, of course, would be highly popular with Indian voters. And Modi is always playing to the voters, doing things which will get him support. It can take place. It can take the shape of greater sabotage. Instead of military strikes, maybe the greater possibility is India stepping up sabotage terrorist activities in Pakistan, particularly in Baluchistan, somewhere to disrupt the Cpec route or in other areas of Pakistan. So these are I think, the security implications for Pakistan. For the rest, we'll follow whatever questions you have. We'll try to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I think it's we have a perspective, or at least the contours of the framework in which we're going to discuss. I'll try to sort of throw a rather big question, because it appears from the statement that was recently made by the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, symbolically in the Richard Nixon Library. Nixon was the one who opened up to China. And what he says is very, very serious. He said, the free world must triumph over this new tyranny. And he says, the old paradigm of blind engagement with China simply won't get it done. It appears that there's a new great game in the town. Now, so the question that I would like to put to you gentlemen is whether would India be, as some of the Indian writers and some of the Western world would like India to be the frontline state, if you will, in containing China and be a Western pawn in the new great game? What will be the role, to simplify the question, what if there is a great game in the town, what India, you think, what kind of a role India would be playing in this great game in which it borders China? We must not forget that. Sir, may I, whoever wants to tackle this question first, please go ahead. Hussain Haroon साहब, आप बताइएगा.
You see, everyone sitting here is well aware that after China accelerated its development and growth, as any sovereign nation enhances its power. Now, if you go back into history, China was a greater power some time back. Over years, Asia got dominated by the West, specifically the British Isles. And everyone, I mean, Little Britain, with a footprint the size of a pygmy, was ruling the world where the sun never set. Why did they need to do it? It's the acquisition of wealth. And in that acquisition of wealth, there is a ruthlessness. Look what they did to Africa. They reduced it to being a pauper perpetually. And until China came around and raised their levels of expectancy, the West treated Africa like a backwater. Nothing for them. Aid, yes, but nothing more. But aid, the sort of aid they're giving now to Pakistan, to keep your nose above the water so you just about exist, and you get punished like Lebanon if you step out of line. The question here is, China has a right to expand its interests, and with that comes territory and wealth. And they have showed a way that did not exist before. They're showing the way with so much money that the United States and the Western allies have never put into their colonies or called them what you will. So the question is, China is asserting itself. It has brought about itself into a situation where even puny India will not be able to stand up to them. Don't forget, India, on the basis of what the United States is providing to it, in fact, India's entire intent will be bent upon how much the United States will be able to pay them to do so.
Exactly.
And the United States, with I think roughly $40 trillion in debts, is not going to be able to do very much.
Thank you, sir. So you think that probably since the Western era is dawning and there's no more, so India probably would not find enough incentive to be part of this alliance. So, Mr. Najamudin, could you also give your perspective on this very question, whether what will be the role, whether there is a new great game in the town, and if it is so, what is the role that India, you think, is possibly can play, because it will have implications for Pakistan. So, over to you.
Let's put this in perspective. China today has a per capita income of $10,000. The United States of America, the per capita income is $61,000. That's the difference. The Chinese have said to the world that we have two dates in mind, 2035 and 2049.
Why?
We'll be a moderately prosperous country by 2035, and by 2049, which is the centenary year for us, we will join the ranks of the developed countries. They have a defense budget which is at $260 billion. The Americans and other think tanks in America and elsewhere keep talking about whether this is the right figure or whether it is conceals and other figures, etc. But everybody concedes that it is minuscule, or at least much lower than the $720 billion that the United States expends on defense. Let me put it this way, that the ambitions that President Xi Jinping and which has caused umbrage in a number of countries or caused anxieties in a number of countries, has been relatively modest in these terms. Second, I think I want to talk a little bit about what was initially mentioned with regard to India's or China's position vis-a-vis the Indian incursions and what happened there, and what the reflection on Cpec and the routes will be. First, I think we should remember that in 1962, after the war ended, we arrived at a territorial agreement, boundary agreement with China in 1963. Article 6 of that particular agreement says that this is the map that we've drawn up. This map pertains to the 6,200 square kilometers that the Indians have always claimed Pakistan is given away. What they said in that particular agreement was that this is a provisional agreement. Once the dispute in Kashmir has been settled, then this will stand if the area comes into Pakistan's possession. If it does not, we will renegotiate with whoever is given this part. That is to say, in 1963, they were upholding the fact that that Kashmir is a disputed territory, and when this dispute is settled, then and then alone will we know whether this boundary will remain as it is, or if it goes into different hands, then we will renegotiate it. Now, this is in 63 at a time when you think that their relations with India were at a particularly low level. This is true, but China was trying to maintain a principled position as to what was it. Now, this principled position was upheld again on the 5th of August when the Chinese spokesperson, Foreign Ministry spokesperson talked about the fact that Kashmir is a disputed area. It is a dispute between India and Pakistan. We would advocate that it be settled peacefully by negotiations between the two countries. When he was asked to comment subsequently on whether or what is the Chinese view on the Pakistan declaration of IOK or Kashmir as part of Pakistan, he said, I have already answered the question with regard to Kashmir. Now, these are indicators, to my mind, of what their position is. Lastly, I would like to mention that when questions about Cpec arose, the Chinese ambassador in India said that if India is so concerned about this, then we can have another route passing to Gwadar, but through the Indian occupied Kashmir. Now, this was later withdrawn, but the very fact that this was made indicated that they were open to suggestions on pragmatically resolving the problem. Now, the Cpec is not the only route. They have also a route through to Bangladesh.
So this question will come on the later. Just you can sort of give us your view that whether there is a great game in the town and will India have a role in it or not. We are coming to the Cpec in a while. Yes, sir.
Okay. You know, the great game is something that we like to conjure up. We like to conjure up. Right now, there is no great game. As I told you, the figures are such that establish that there is no great game. What is happening is that the United States, and particularly President Trump, is seeking to utilize relations with China to bolster his chances for re-election. The Americans have traditionally needed an enemy which can justify the defense expenditures that they have. This is true both of the Democratic and the Republican administrations, but it is particularly true of President Trump's administration and Secretary Pompeo's distrust but verify as how we are going to deal with China. It does not enjoy credibility in the world. The Germans, the French, and the others are looking at what opportunities they will lose in economic terms if they fall in line. But there is a particular weight that the United States carries, that it carries in NATO, it carries in Europe generally, its threat to withdraw forces from Germany, etc. These are all elements that are leaving many of the United States allies, or some of them can now be termed as erstwhile allies, somewhat confused about the direction that they're taking. This is true with regard to the relationship with China. This is true with regard to the position on the JCPOA. And therefore, you see a great deal more confusion rather than a great game. That would be my conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ambassador Shahid Amin, is it really great game in the town? Or no, as Mr. Najamudin thinks, not yet, at least not yet. Let's see your perspective on that.
Well, you can call it a kind of a continuation of the conflict, or at least the rivalries of the past. They previously involved Britain Now they involve China and USA and India and Pakistan. So in some form, the tussle continues. And you can call it the great game or otherwise. I refer to your statement about Pompeo. It sounded very hawkish, but what is the reality? In 1962, remember, United States and UK rushed arms to India on a very large scale. Has the USA done anything like this or even shown any indication of doing so? Clearly, this is not the case. So words are okay. You can talk very hawkish language, but what is the action on the ground? Practically nothing. Secondly, there's no doubt the United States relations with China have become more strained. Trump has talked in very belligerent language at times. But firstly, Trump may not be there after November. And secondly, the stakes are very high in terms of economic interests. The United States is the biggest trading partner of China. China has got its foreign exchange assets, I think, in USA. So to think that China would jeopardize all of that is very unlikely in my view. I said in the beginning, China has no intention to have any kind of a major military confrontation and with anybody, neither with India nor with China or anyone else. So this talk in the news media is a little bit sensational. It does not reflect the reality. And as you mentioned, or Najamudin Sahib mentioned, that China is thinking of 2049 when it will join the ranks of the developed nations. So China is reconciled to the super power status of the United States for the foreseeable future. And I think we are also making a little bit too much of a conclusion that the US has declined or the sunset has come. I think all of this again is sensational talk. Look at the reality in terms of military power and economic power. The United States remains by far the strongest military power in the world. And no doubt it is declining in relative terms, but not in absolute terms. So we should not talk as if China is about to become a superpower and replacing the United States. United States will remain very much a superpower, at least for the next 20, 30 or 40 years. So this is the reality on the ground. And finally, we have to think of it like this, that no doubt history is taking turns. The balance of power is shifting from the West towards Asia, but it is going to take time. It's not going to take place tomorrow. It will not take place in the next decade. Probably it will take 3 decades before this transformation actually takes place.
Thank you, sir. Before we move on to another question on Cpec, a little follow-up on what has been discussed. This hawkish talk from Washington, do you think some way or the other is related to the forthcoming US elections? Because that will kind of give us a perspective as to if the world is really not at the verge of being changed or a new great game being initiated, then would it be that this kind of a hawkish talk is connected to the forthcoming elections in the US? Can we have a brief comment from the panel on this very aspect of what we discussed initially, sir? Maybe sir, you can continue, Shahid Amin sahab, आप इसी पे जरा हमें बता दीजिए, फिर then we'll go back to Najamudin sahab and Hussain Haroon sahab.
No doubt the election has a relevance in this context. Trump, after all, has won popularity, at least in the past, by talking tough about China and asserting the special role of the United States as the #1 power and so forth. So anytime there is a strain in relation with China and this kind of tough talking takes place, I suppose his core supporters are encouraged, and therefore the rhetoric about China is at least partially related to the election strategy in the United States. But then it's next only 2 months or so before the election. And if we proceed on what will be my assumption, that there is a great chance that Trump will be defeated in the election. you will see a total change of policies in the United States towards China. At least the hawkishness will go away. I'm not saying the basic tensions will go away, but the hawkish talk will go away. In any case, assuming that Biden wins the election, he will try to make a point that his policies are entirely different from those of Trump. He was unnecessarily provoking China and creating controversies and tensions, and that under Biden presidency, things are going to change for the better. So I see a trend very soon in the near future in which the present tensions may to some extent be reversed, although I'm not doubting the fact that there are long-term rivalry between China and USA, and that will continue.
Thank you, sir. Najamudin, so what your take on this?
So were you asking me?
So yeah, I was asking you that do you think it is this rhetoric, this warmongering, this jingoism, and coming from Washington, Pompeo, and all those people, is it related to the elections, forthcoming elections in the U.S.? Is it to feed to the core constituency of Trump?
Yeah, well, that's obvious. I mean, Trump has made no secret of the fact that this is one of the principal points on which he is going to appeal to his solid electoral base, the evangelicals and the others who want to see China as an atheist country that is curbing religious freedom, that is doing other things that are unacceptable from their point of view. This is an appeal to that particular. Before that, as you know.
Okay. Sure.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Before that, the I think with Biden, you may have a change, but the base will remain. You know, I said before, and I will repeat, that the defense establishment, or what is known as the deep state in the United States, needs to have an adversary. Adversary was terrorism for a long time. Now China has been placed in a position where it is going to be the next adversary. But it is going to be an adversary in terms that are much less belligerent than those that Secretary Pompeo has adopted, and which perforce are also what Trump is saying. Remember that Trump has talked, as Bolton has said, that Trump said, leave other things alone, do what you like in Xinjiang, do whatever you like, but for God's sake, buy more agricultural products and make my electoral base more solid. I need to be able to tell my farmers that we have a big market in China and that market is going to continue. Now, whether Bolton, of course, has been called a liar by Trump, the fact is that these are statements that have appeared before. So when you say whether that this has an impact or is related to the election, certainly it is. How much of a change will come with Biden? I think that China will continue to remain the principal adversary, but alongside Russia, because I think Biden has concerns about Russia and about Russian interference in elections, which frankly, the Democrats think is much more important in terms of interference than anything that China is doing. But nevertheless, I think you will see there is a change, of a considerable change in terms of both the rhetoric and in terms of the concrete action on the ground once President Trump is gone. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Thank you. Hussain, Haroon Sahab, do you agree with that perhaps this rhetoric is temporary and it is for short term, and it's not a kind of damage which would be irreversible in terms of US-China relationships, that they want to sort of appeal to the constituency that they want to depend and want to win an election? It's very short term, you think? Hussain,
No,
Haroon Sahab,
I have my own opinion on this, with a great amount of respect to Najamudin Saab and Shahid Amin Saab. I have been stating my opinion for many years publicly, and that is that there is going to be a clash of interest, because the United States, for many years, to keep the supremacy of the West going, and it's not the question of the supremacy of the West. I think the rest are basically hanging on to the United States coattails. But United States wants to have the right to determination of whatever happens in this world, whether it leads to its military power or whatever way it takes them to do it. It's not temporary, it is ongoing. And I believe that this will carry on. If you look at the history of the United States, first South America was its backyard, and then the Pacific became their backyard. So much so that they went and occupied the Philippines and then Vietnam, and then they got checked. And even in the South America, the movement of leftist states in South America checked the American advance along with the Caribbean in a very strong fashion. I'm just mentioning these as incidentals. Incidentals because the Americans will always believe in war. Their entire economy is based on war. Their entire history is based on war. And when they couldn't find someone to fight, they fought each other in the Civil War. So war is an integral part of their psyche. And I'm afraid it's not dying out in any way. Coming to another point, and that is anyone who would have challenged the United States would have come to this. Now, China basically tried to compartmentalize it. They said, right, we'll take on the economy, and the Russians, we have an arrangement with you. You take on NATO, if that's what you want to call it at the moment, instead of the West. So between the two, they have rankled enough Western thoughts. I mean, today, Europe shares power. What shares power? It's dictated to by the Americans. And whether France or the UK, and the UK, especially after the stupidity of Brexit, has fallen into the American arms, whether it was a trap or whether it was actually, nothing is actual. It's all an illusion. The truth of the matter is the supremacy which is governed by so-called numbers of states. We've got 108 states between Asia and Africa. I'm afraid they've never had a voice. China is giving it a voice today. And all of a sudden, Africa seems to be important to the United States as well. Well, I'm afraid this confrontational posture of Trump was a part of a plan of destroying a lot of what the West had achieved after the Second World War, because those premises no longer exist. I mean, they may be there in writing. Look at the Geneva Pact on war, and then look at all the violations by the Americans, so-called intervention by the UN, in fact, done on the sole authority of the United States. So, I mean, I can't take much more time. I'm only going to say, no, it's going to be confrontational. No, a lot of institutions have to fall. This so-called arrangement of World Bank and IMF, the Americans destroyed GATT. What's left? IMF and World Bank. Well, the Chinese have given much more to Africa in the last 3 years to 5 years than these institutions have in its last 50 years. Things are changing. The realities are changing. Economies are changing. I mean, COVID itself has had such a huge impact on the economies of the world. And I personally believe that is also changing the institutionalization of the West. These changes are going to bring about a lot of differences. And these aspects of skirmishes, you may like to call them, or whatever, as far as these geographical needs are concerned, I don't think anyone is wiser, richer, or poorer by acquisitions of 40 square miles or less. Question is, as has rightly been said by Najamudin Sheikh Saab, a warning has been issued. It's called the shot across the bow. And there is a new player in town who's asserting itself. Building 10 islands in the South China Sea is not a sign of peace, but neither is the American intent. It is continuously military in intent. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You are so right. The only thing constant in history, human history, is change. That be the case. And also you refer to the South China Sea, and my next question really is about that. What we witnessed is a standoff between US Navy and Air Force with their Chinese counterparts. In fact, US has 3, I think, aircraft carriers, and China also has sufficient air power and naval sources there. This on the one side a flashpoint. Some of the people, analysts, I have read some of them, that perhaps this China-India skirmishes were meant to be a diversionary theater of war, if at all there is a war, so that the Chinese war efforts are divided between China-India theater and a theater between China and US in the South China Sea. How do you see these two theaters of war? Are they really two theaters of war, or it is the same theater, it's just a diversionary tactic? It's very military in its, but I think it has connotations in terms of geopolitics. Could you take it on, sir, this one if you like? Hussain, Amin sahab, aap hi isko kar dijiye,
I personally believe, and Najamudin Sheikh Saab will let you know better. Let's be clear, India joined the Pacific War Order of America at a time when ASEAN itself is lukewarm towards it. And let's put another point out. The theaters of war will change continuously. They brought in the South China Sea as a theater of war, and the BRI was the answer of China. China has a lot of other answers, I'm sure, that it would like to bring into play. But the question about India, how can you expect, I mean, you know yourself that the Indian army is unfortunately not quite up to the mark, and neither are Indian finances. I strongly suggest, yes, we're well aware that the per capita in the United States is much higher than China. But if you go to these figures, what was the per capita in Britain when it conquered the world? What was the per capita of America when it got involved in lesser wars in South America or Asia? So, you know, these things, when a country has to go to war for strategic interest, it generally draws a bottom line and tries to achieve it. It may not, but it tries. As far as India is concerned, India has multifaceted problems. I'm not taking the poverty in India as one of them, but it is one of them as well. And then India has other problems. And one of the other problems of India is there are, as Zulfikar Ali Bhutto said to Jean-Pierre Trudeau in 1971 in Karachi, India has vociferous tendencies. And those vociferous tendencies are met with wielding a big stick to little Goa and little Sikkim and many others. But sooner or later, it's going to step on someone's toes. It stepped on China's toes. As far as Ghulam is concerned, as Najamudin has taken on, Ghulam and all these areas in Ladakh are contested areas. And we believe they are ours, and we have drawn a map to that effect now. The question is not whose is it. The question is they wanted to challenge and threaten the validity of the multi-trillion-dollar BRI. And part of that goes through the area where they wanted to build an airfield. An airfield for what? To threaten China. So who made the first threat? It was the Indians. And I personally believe that China wanted to make clear to the world it will not tolerate a threat to the BRI. And it certainly did so emphatically. And in the process, if Pakistan benefited as far as Baltistan is concerned, why not? These, in my mind, are the chessboard playing, but the truth and strategic matters of interest that really govern. I don't think India, with its so-called naval strength, can be a Pacific power. It can follow on the coattails of America. And I don't think India, with its lack of equipment, its lack of supply train in that particular aspect of hardware, can actually, they were given a Cray 4 computer by the Americans 20 years ago, and they're still learning how to use it. I don't think they're a potential threat. The Chinese are way ahead. What the Chinese have, and I can tell you that 20 years ago, I was in China at Huawei as their guest, and they sacked the MD of Huawei after he had had a brilliant 30% increase in sales in that particular year. I tried to understand, how is this possible? And they said, we had sanctioned him $10 billion to do research. And he only spent 7 billion of it on research. He's 3 billion short. He doesn't meet our vision. It's the vision. It's the people. Look at the discharge of the Four Gorges Dam. It's 28,000 units of electricity, more than Pakistan's entire current requirement for one place. But the Chinese are just too far ahead. Yes, they're not as big as America today, but they're not as degenerate as America today as well. To put Trump in as president of the United States, who is unwinding everything that they have knitted with great caution over the years. Let's see how it goes. I know Biden, I've met Biden, and Biden is going to be completely different, but he's going to have to make up years of the undoing of America by Donald Trump.
Thank you. Mr. Sheikh Saab, what do we understand? What do we take from the rivalries in the South China Sea between US and China, the another standoff, if you will, there? How does that tell upon the new world order?
Answer that question very briefly, because I think we need to spend a little time on Cpec.
Yes, I'll be coming to the Cpec. Just brief two comments, and then we go. We can go to the Cpec if you like.
Yeah,
okay, you want to go to the Cpec? Okay. So this, my question is, Pakistan Cpec is considered as a game changer for the socio-economic development. On the one hand, on the other, it has long-term geostrategic, geoeconomic salience for Pakistan. Indian military governments of Galwan Valley in Ladakh could have threatened Karakoram Highway. Is India really playing role of a spoiler for China and Pakistan and intends to sabotage a Cpec or the BRI, as you call it? Najamudin Sheikh Saab, please, your take on this. Whether India has been given the role of a spoiler of the Belt and Road Initiative.
Look, I think we should be clear that for China, Cpec is one of the more important elements of the Belt and Road Initiative of China. In fact, it is critical. And it is critical built on the fact that this will be used not only by Pakistan, not only by the Xinjiang areas of China, but also by the other countries of Central Asia. This is clear from the fact that Gwadar has a capacity for 9 million tons of cargo every year. 23 tons is one container. Now, you cannot visualize that this is going to come only in terms of the traffic from Xinjiang to Gwadar. It has to meet the thing of the entire area. In that area, in my view, Chinese have always included trade from east of Pakistan as much as from the west of Pakistan and the north of Pakistan, going up to Central Asia and providing this linkages. Now, if we see this as the vision, we have to see how far it can be implemented and what are the other elements of the BRI that will supplement or complement what is happening. In South Asia, the Chinese have a plan for a road to Chittagong also. That is another plan that they've got with Bangladesh. They've got a third, which was, as I said, something that was mentioned, something that was mentioned immediately by the Chinese ambassador in India. That if you think that we need to have another route, Cpec route, we will put it through Indian occupied Kashmir. And this was a suggestion made, it was later withdrawn. But what I'm saying is that China was taking a pragmatic view that if this Cpec is to be fully utilized, it is going to be utilized in this particular fashion. So let me again come back to this, that Cpec is a game changer for Pakistan, but Pakistan has to think in terms of how much transparency there is going to be. The Chinese have said that yes, we will, and the Chinese have been very, very liberal. I'm sure that much of the shortfalls that have come in our foreign exchange reserves have been met by the Chinese, and with no limits on how quickly these have to be repaid. This is something that emphasizes the importance that China attaches to Cpec as the key point, as the highlight of the Belt and Road Initiative. So let us focus on trying to see how much of this we can utilize to our advantage. We have not yet, as far as I know, a counselor from China who was with the World Bank while passing through Pakistan said China will lose 85 million jobs because the industries that these are based on are industries that will no longer be viable at the new pay scales in China. And we have not sent a single delegation yet to talk to these Chinese businesses or industries that are likely to close and work out collaborative arrangements. So we have to do a great deal more to make Cpec the game changer that it promises to be. Now I think that we've got new people who are with that Cpec authority. If that Cpec authority law is passed, then perhaps you will see more advances. But we have to be sure that that Cpec authority does not abuse its authority, but nevertheless, it will provide us a particular point of contact which can enable us to utilize to the full Cpec possibilities.
Okay.
And those Cpec possibilities are such that you've just opened Rashakai, you are talking about Dabeji, you're talking about these special economic zones being created, and the large investment in these special economic zones must come from melding of the Chinese industries that are closing and the industries that we intend setting up, and taking advantage of our relatively cheaper labor. We have to make sure also that the training facilities, for instance, a very good report that I saw was that in Gilgit-Baltistan, a special Chinese bilateral arrangement in Gilgit-Baltistan has trained some 700 people in how development is to take place. We need to do the same thing in Gwadar with Baluch nationals, particularly, so that they feel that they are part of the game and that they are benefiting from this area. At the moment, in Balochistan, we are faced with the fact that there is a deliberate effort, an external effort to try and foment trouble there. Now, overcoming that trouble is our issue. No matter who is fomenting it, we have to find ways to make the Baluch feel that they are part of the larger Pakistan and will do whatever is necessary in order to make Balochistan the prosperous place that it can be on the basis of its mineral resources and other resources. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Shahid Amin, sir, can you also give your perspective on Cpec, the security implications, and the threats that we have in terms of what is happening on our borders with India, or what is happening between China and India, and its implications, socio-economic, geoeconomic, and humanitarian threats that we will probably face in the coming few years.
There's no doubt Cpec is a key project for Pakistan. It has been called a game changer, and I agree. And it is making good progress. I think from whatever I've seen, so many of the projects have been completed. Many are in advanced stage of implementation. And I think over a period of time, maybe more projects are likely to be added to it. So the scope is not necessarily confined to what has been mentioned so far. So there's no doubt this has made a terrific difference for Pakistan. And much lies also on our planners and our schemers to make the most of Cpec. One gets a feeling that China is doing much more for the implementation of these projects than Pakistan. That is unfortunate and needs to be corrected. No doubt there are security implications. And as I mentioned, after this setback in Ladakh, India may find a way to try to destabilize Pakistan. That will be probably something that will be given priority by India. Already on Indian TV, I hear experts saying we must give all-out training to Baluch secessionists and all that kind of thing. So we should be prepared that there will be more threats to the Cpec route by instigating local secessionist kind of elements. And I entirely agree that the best way to tackle this is to give them maximum jobs and opportunities. That is the better way rather than using military force. If they feel that they are really participants in the prosperity, they have a direct share, and they have a control of their own resources, that is going to dampen any feeling for separatism or secessionism. So this is very key for Pakistan, and I'm not sure we are doing as much as we should do in this context. At the same time, I'm worried about some aspects of Cpec. I think a situation is developing in overall terms that we are becoming more and more dependent on China. And even the recent spat with Saudi Arabia, which is, in my view, totally unnecessary and should not have happened at all, that is also going to make us more dependent on China. If for instance, the economic aid received from Saudi Arabia or the oil supply is stopped, where will we go to recoup the situation? Obviously towards China, but that makes us more and more dependent on China, and that is never a good thing. A sovereign state must protect its interests. It must not depend only on one source or one area for support. It must keep open its options, including the traditional link with the United States and the West. These options must be kept open. So this is where I am a little worried about the implications of Cpec. And if China, as some people predict, is going to make Gwadar as a kind of a naval base, which it might well be tempted to do, that is the kind of thing which needs to be avoided, because that will suggest that we are becoming more and more dependent on China, and almost as some people have been making the comparison of East India Company gradually taking over the whole area. So this is what I have some apprehensions about Cpec. The answer lies with us. We should have a vigorous policy of implementing Cpec projects ourselves. depending less on China, ensuring that whatever is done does not compromise our sovereignty, and we must not become entirely dependent on China. We must keep open all avenues, and that is the best way of ensuring our security, not letting ourselves to become a kind of a dependency of China. I think the economic opportunities of Cpec, including the free trade areas, developing energy resources, these need to be given greater priority. And I think the recent appointment of General Bajwa in this as a kind of a commanding figure in Cpec is going to help matters, because otherwise there was an impression of as if we are rudderless. So these things are good signs that we are taking a greater effort, making a greater effort to ensure that Cpec projects are completed in due time, and that more and more participation by Pakistan becomes a feature. And the Chinese initiative is very welcome, but it should not totally dominate Cpec. This is my thinking about Cpec.
Thank you, sir. Ambassador Hussain Haroon साहब, मैं आपके पास आऊँगा इसी क्वेश्चन के साथ. I just want to ask you, is really the dependency syndrome setting on us as a unwanted consequence of our dependence on China, as put across by Ambassador Shahid Amin, or it is what we cannot avoid? One. Second, what are the internal and external threats to Cpec dream becoming a reality? Sir, Hussain Haroon, sir.
In 1983, I stood up in the budget speech of the Majlis Ashura and said, we are passing a very important mark today where we are committing over 25% of our GDP to repayment of loans.
Oh.
We're getting dependent on money coming from abroad. That warning was not taken, but Ghulam Ishaq said to me privately the day after, you had raised a very pertinent point. Well, what do we do? And my answer to that is what you're still doing or not doing. In Cpec, if there has been, and I'm using the word very, very properly, if there has been any failure so far, it has been the failure of the Pakistanis to commit their side of what they need to do. We haven't done it, and we don't seem to be doing it. I mean, what is Cpec? Cpec is a game changer only if we play the game. We're not playing the game. What is the total allocation to the Cpec side of things in the last 5 budgets or 10 budgets or whatever you want to do? And you'll be surprised to see it is very, very poor. So we're not exactly implementing our side of Cpec. Now, what are the threats? There are all sorts of threats because America, India, and Israel together have plans to outwit the Chinese, to whom Cpec, as has been said earlier, is a very important project part of BRI. So we have our not only ordinary threats, but we have international accumulated threats. Now, let me get to a point. Why shouldn't the Chinese go through India, through Bangladesh, or through Iran, as they've now made a $500 billion pact with Iran, starting off with Chabahar in the mix? We should wake up. What is happening? What is happening is you are not fulfilling what you should be doing. And let me tell you something about sovereign independence. Sovereign independence depends upon the ability to a country to be able to produce for itself. We are not even producing enough sugar or enough edible items that we used to produce very easily first. So what is happening is on every front, we have production dying down or easing down or whatever you want to call it. in realistic terms or holistic terms as it used to be. And more than that, each and every person from everywhere is selling Pakistan to whatever degree he can sell Pakistan. Where is the commitment to the nation? Where is the commitment to the country? So it's not just a question of China. China is basically buying out all your loans because you want them bought out. I had warned you. There's big advertisements in newspapers a few days ago of what this government has achieved financially. And I laughed and I said, yes, but minus taking the reality of the Saudi petroleum inputs and loans, we have to pay those back sometime as well. And look what happened. Suddenly they withdrew and we were caught with our pants down. If China had not given you this facility, the world would have wrapped you on your fingers and closed you down like they've tried to close down other countries. So don't think for a moment that the Chinese are happy in what they're doing. I've been to China a couple of times. I've spoken to the Chinese ambassador many a times. They would like Pakistan to take on their slack. If we're not taking up the slack, we're responsible for it. So let's first have the ability to do things. I mean, one of the most important things the Chinese agreed to go with you along was the Cascade project in the Himalayan mountains of the K2 mountains. Nothing's moved. This little dam going up Daimler Basha, that's just, you know, think of it. We're really people who have got large visions and large mouths, but small minds and small outputs. Let's understand, who are we? We are not what we used to be, and we don't seem to be making the grade. I'm afraid, Baluch Saab, you said 12 o'clock is the limit, so I kept a meeting at 12. They're all sitting waiting. I'm going to have to beg leave.
No problem. Thank you for joining us. Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
The last, we have only 15 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. So maybe I can request Mr. Najamudin Sheikh and Mr. Shahid Amin to give us a little perspective on what are the implications on Kashmir with regard to India-China conflict, or what is happening in the region, and how do they see the government of Pakistan's searcher on something on Kashmir?
I just want to say,
what are the implications?
I just want to say,
sir, go ahead.
I just want to say this on Kashmir, and that is that as far as Kashmir is concerned, I think it's very sad when the promoters of the Organization of Islamic Countries try to stop us from holding a Kashmir conference or a conference that will promote the Islamic aspect of Kashmir. And I think that for whatever it's worth, I've been one of the greatest critics of the current system and government, whatever, but I think that one thing was done, and that is that we must insist and hold a conference on Kashmir. Without it, it's never going to budge. So I would like to say publicly that that is very important. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir Najamudin Sheikh Saab and Shahid Amin Saab, please can you give me your take on the impact of India-China military conflict on Kashmir, one, and related to that is our government's effort to put Kashmir occupied, Indian occupied Kashmir on our map. What are its, how do we decipher this political move or this symbolic move, if you will? Shahid Amin Saab, आप फरमाइए उसके बाद नजमीन शेख साहब अपने.
I think so far as this map is concerned, I have some reservations. From the beginning, we have been taking a very principled position that the status of Jammu and Kashmir is yet to be determined on the basis of exercise of the right of self-determination through a plebiscite as promised in the United Nations Security Council resolutions. This has been a principled position, and for whatever reason, now we have changed that stance. suddenly we have declared all of Kashmir as a part of Pakistan. Remember, even Azad Kashmir was never considered a part of Pakistan. It was considered a territory administered by Pakistan,
Even
whose
Gilgit
status is yet to be
Baltistan,
determined.
even Gilgit Baltistan as well.
Whose status is yet to be determined.
Ji, correct.
Now, I suppose it is a populist move, try to win applause in Pakistan and try to neutralize the criticism of the opposition parties who are accusing the government of not doing enough on Kashmir. So it is more related to internal politics, but it does not change the ground realities. India remains in occupation, no doubt, an illegal occupation of the larger part of Kashmir in terms of population. And you may issue any number of maps, but that reality is not changed. बल्कि वो जो गालिब का शेर है कि दिल के बहलाने को गालिब ये ख्याल अच्छा है. हमको मालूम है जन्नत की हकीकत, लेकिन दिल के बहलाने को गालिब ये ख्याल अच्छा है. So this has been, I think, an exercise done without regard to our principal position, which and what has happened to justify our action. Is there any legal basis for what we have done so? Have the people of Kashmir decided in a plebiscite that they want to be part of Pakistan? Has even the Pakistani parliament passed a resolution to that effect? It is just, done arbitrarily, more or less like a political stunt. So I think it is unfortunate. It should not have been done. It has weakened our case on Kashmir. Similarly, showing Junagadh and Munawwadar as part of Pakistan. Well, what was the partition scheme? That the Muslim majority contiguous areas will go to Pakistan and the non-Muslim majority areas will go to India. Junagadh and Manavadar are neither Muslim majority nor contiguous to Pakistan. By showing them as part of Pakistan, we are diluting our much more important case in Kashmir, which is it is the Muslim majority and contiguousness which is the basis of Kashmir joining Pakistan. So for the sake of a small, I do not know what kind of a gain, by showing Junagadh as part of Pakistan, we have diluted our position on Kashmir. Now India can use the argument in the reverse, that look, you yourself do not give importance to the majority of the population and the contiguous factor by showing Junagadh as part of Pakistan. So I think it has been unfortunate. It should not have been done. And obviously, no real effort has been made to look into the history of the Kashmir issue. Just on the spur of the moment, we have declared Kashmir to be a part of Pakistan. Well, you may make any number of declarations that does not change the hard reality. As far as the calling of a meeting on Kashmir is concerned, yes, no doubt we should make all such efforts. But look at the reality. Again, we seem to take, I do not know what kind of a stance that we forget the realities. How many countries, Muslim countries, have supported Pakistan on Kashmir? At best, Turkey. At best, Mahathir, when he was the prime minister. I do not know what the present prime minister of Malaysia is going to do. Mahathir is now history. So let us say you call a meeting of the OIC, or you have your own separate Islamic conference held. If those countries are not willing to stand up for Pakistan so far, how will they reverse their position by attending such a conference? The likelihood is many of them will excuse themselves away from holding the conference, and then it will look even worse that we tried to hold a conference and we failed to, it failed to materialize. So this is where careful backdoor diplomacy should be applied, not the frontal statement made by Mr. Qureshi, our foreign minister, who for the first time in history has publicly criticized Saudi Arabia, not realizing the importance of Pakistan-Saudi relations, not realizing how important Pakistan has been for Saudi Arabia has been for Pakistan over the years. He has jeopardized that relationship by making a comment in a news media channel. This is another very funny way of doing things. A foreign minister should make statements on the basis of whatever is the policy in the proper way. The foreign office should speak, not the foreign minister joining a channel and getting carried away by the question being asked by the compare. So he should keep away from these news channels and make only considered policy statements. The fact is that we have a grievance against Saudi Arabia. Why is it not doing enough on Kashmir? But the reality is that, like so many other Muslim countries, Saudi Arabia's policy on Kashmir has undergone a change. And why? Because Saudi Arabia is increasingly looking at India as a long-term buyer of Saudi oil. Plus, India has got importance in other ways as well. Then, in addition, they have grievances. Pakistan did not support us on the Qatar issue. They did not support us on the Yemen issue. They did not support us in the context of Iran and so forth. So this is the kind of thing which is happening. No doubt effort has to be made to persuade Saudi Arabia to hold that Islamic conference. No doubt we have done very key things for Saudi Arabia. We are the protector of Saudi security, which is a fantastic thing that we have done over the years. So these are levers in our hand, but they should be exercised through silent diplomacy, not a public posturing like that done by a foreign minister. So I think in both areas, we have shown poor diplomacy, and the sooner we correct ourselves, the better.
Thank you, sir. I think great takeaways to be not be so undiplomatic while conducting diplomacy and not to be carried away by the questions of the media. Indeed, such a great statement. Najamudin, we have last 10 minutes actually. I'll be grateful if you can give your perspective on Kashmir and then a little bit wrapping up of what we said today, and then I'll make my own concluding remarks at the end. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rasool. I must say that there is very little of what Shahid Amin Saab said that I disagree with. It was, I think, a very good summation, perhaps more emotionally expressed than I would have, but absolutely correct in terms of both recognizing our limitations and making sure that we do things in a way that reflects well on our ability to conduct policy. We have, frankly, as Shahid Amin Saab said, failed on that account. But there is one thing that I do want to add, and that's on the basis of some research that I did. You know, the map that we put out, we have put out official maps before this. From 1947 onwards, the Geological Survey of Pakistan has been putting out maps, and those maps from 1947 and then 2001, 2002, they all did show Kashmir in the way that it is being shown now. So it isn't such a departure from past practice that there have been what are called political maps. And those political maps were published in Pakistan. So I'm not sure that this is so much of a departure. Now, again, I don't have sufficient knowledge to be able to say whether this impacts this way or this impacts that way. On that, I think we have to make sure that, as Shahid Amin Saab said, that we prepare the ground through backdoor channels. Our efforts have been, internationally, have been disastrous. We pride ourselves on the fact that 3 times the Security Council has met. But these are not Security Council meetings as a formal Security Council meetings. These are closed door deliberations, and these have been brought about only because China asked for them, and they remain closed door. You can say that we did our briefing subsequent to that. The Indians did their briefing subsequent to that, and we had a slinging match, which brought us no results. We should go back and look at our record in the past. We went to the United Nations Human Rights Commission, and then faced a situation where we had to withdraw our resolution, and where Iran suddenly chose to acquire a role for itself in terms of playing a mediatory role. These are things that you should not allow yourself to be drawn into, where you go to an international forum and find yourself being subjected to humiliation. Therefore, the emphasis has to be on backdoor diplomacy, on making sure that you have that degree of support, and to realistically recognize that even when you do this, you're up against a contending power, which is weakening. Let us be quite clear that the India of today and Prime Minister Modi's position has been reinforced. I don't think that anything is going to shake Prime Minister Modi's hold, because his nationalist appeal has found very good ground in a country which is going more and more towards a Hindu Rashtra. But on the other hand, you have to see that even when it is going for a Hindu Rashtra, you have Hasina Wajid talking about setting up a special place where it's going to be devoted to the sacrifices of the Indian soldiers who participated in what she calls the freedom struggle of Bangladesh. So let us be realistic about how we view the situation. Let us not give ourselves optimistic readings of where the situation is without realizing that we are not really taken very seriously internationally. And for that, I keep coming back to two things that we need to do. First, we need to rebuild our economy. And to rebuild our economy, we need to rebuild our governance. We must start focusing on good governance, and from good governance will flow the capital inputs that you need. Let us remember that today we are, or we should be, we are the 6th largest country in the world in terms of population, but our economy has certainly shown no sign that as a large market, you will become very attractive to people. You have to make yourself attractive. You have to make yourself attractive to your own capitalists, and that alone is what will make a capital come in. You have too many Pakistanis whose resources are in the UAE or elsewhere because they have local economies, and we are not able to get that money back into Pakistan. We have to get our governance right. We have to get our judicial system working in a manner that facilitates this particular operation that you have. And I think that right now the Supreme Court is anxious to do things to make improvements in this regard. But again, I come back to this, that I said this many times before: give foreign policy a rest. Focus on your domestic. Focus on curbing domestic dissent or negotiating how this domestic dissent can be overcome, and focus on how to build your governance once again and your economy once again. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, very much. I think it's been a really illuminating discussion today. What I have gathered, there was so much covered actually in this 1.5 hour, from a broad contours of an emerging new multipolar new world order, to China's potential, to China-US relations, to China-India relations, and coming down, narrow down to on our own way forward for Pakistan. A couple of which I will just, I think what has been said is that we need to really focus on our domestic policy, improving good governance, building economy, and of course, foreign policy anchored in reality, anchored on our potential, anchored on correct understanding of history and the future, what will happen in the coming few days. So I think this webinar has been very instructive, very educative, and may I like to just thank all the three eminent panelists for really taking out their precious time and responding to my personal request to participate. So grateful to all three of you. So thank you very, very much. And thank you, IoBM, for helping me put together this webinar. Thanks a lot, sir. Allah Hafiz, all of you. Thank you very, very much. Thanks a lot. Allah Hafiz.